Yeah, welcome to today's session on large-scale energy development. Really, today's goal is to take a high-level look into utility-scale renewable energy development and some potential opportunities for tribes in the Midwest region. Next slide, please. Looks like I might be having some technical issues. Bear with me 1 minute. And Gwen, are you seeing the updated slideshow, or are the slides changing on your end? I'm getting nothing on mine.
It was changing.
Okay, let me leave and try rejoining. That might be the issue. Might just be my system. All right, and can we try that next slide one more time? Let's see if I'm up and running right. Hey, there we go. All right, fix the issue. Sorry about that delay, everybody. My name is Kyle Levin, and I'm a mechanical engineer with DEMD's branch of renewable and distributed generation. Let's see, I've been with this office for just over 7 years now, and most of my work here is focused on determining the viability of renewable energy development in Indian country with an end goal of enhancing tribal economic development. Next slide, please. So our mission here at DEMD is really what I want to touch base on before we go ahead and get started. So essentially who we are at our core is a division with a main purpose of assisting tribes in achieving economic self-sufficiency through the development of their energy and mineral resources. This is done through a number of different services that we do provide, including grant assistance, technical assistance as well. Next slide, please. All right, so where exactly does the Division of Energy and Mineral Development fall within the whole structure of the BIA? Our division falls under the Office of Trust Services. We're alongside 14 other programs. Some of these programs include the Division of Forestry and Wildland Fire Management, Division of Water and Power, and the Energy Service Center, just to name a few. Next slide, please. All right, so within our own division, DEMD is broken out into 6 separate branches, each really playing its own role in assisting tribes to develop their energy and mineral resources, and in hopes of enhancing economic self-sufficiency for the tribes. There's the branch of renewable and distributed generation, of which I'm a part, fluid minerals such as oil and gas, solid minerals, that would be, mineral and aggregate resources, geotechnical data services branch, which maintains seismic data sets to be used in oil and gas development. Then we have the National Indian Oil and Gas Energy and Mineral System. I know it's a mouthful, NIOGEMS for short, which is really a software for managing oil and gas lease information, well production, and other energy data. And then lastly, but definitely not least, we have the business services branch, which assists tribes in developing business structures and the capacity needed for tribal energy and mineral development. Next slide, please. All right, so we also offer 2 different grant programs here at DEMD. The first is our Energy and Mineral Development Program grants, or EMDP. I apologize in advance. There are a lot of acronyms in this presentation, so please bear with me. So the EMDP really focuses on assessing the viability of developing energy and mineral resources. We funded $6.5 million in 2020, and with our latest round of grant funding, we received 82 proposals with a total requested amount of over $45 million. Second is our Tribal Energy Development Capacity Grant, or TEDC for short. This grant focuses on developing tribal capacity to maximize the economic impact of developing these resources. This grant funded $1.6 million in 2020 and received 34 proposals in 2022 with a total requested amount of nearly $8 million. This really just goes to show that these are both very competitive grants. There's a much greater amount of funds requested than funds available. Next slide, please. All right, so right here we have a map showing the locations of ongoing DEMD grant and technical assistance projects. And between all of the branches, there are a total of 229 projects across the lower 48 and Alaska. Next slide, please. This map shows our ongoing TEDC projects. These are also spread across the lower 48 and Alaska. And the aims of these projects range from anything from assessing and developing regulatory and business capacity to evaluation and formation of tribal utility authorities. Next slide, please. All right, so now that we've really gone through the Division of Energy and Mineral Development as a whole, let's get into a little bit more detail about my branch. So the branch of renewable and distributed generation works with tribes to formulate and implement clean energy development strategies, really based on each tribe's internal goals. Most of the work that we do is focused on the early stages of development. This includes resource assessments, feasibility studies, review of lease agreements, and definitely a lot more than that too. We've been working on a number of key services that we've tried to bolster over the years within our branch. This includes lease agreement review, strategic planning, and again, feasibility studies, trying to build out our capacity to do that in-house, and then also through our grant programs. We have projects ranging from solar and wind to geothermal, and in more recent years, taking a big chunk out of the microgrid sector as well, as that's a growing concept too. Next slide, please. All right, so getting into the focus of this presentation, what exactly do we mean by large scale? Really here we're referring to utility scale projects. These are the projects that are front of the meter and are designed to put electricity directly onto the grid. These projects sell their energy to spot markets and wholesale buyers. And then these wholesale buyers and spot markets then in turn sell the power to utilities. For the most part, these are going to be your multi-megawatt projects. There are definitely some exceptions to this. And the revenue from these projects is typically generated through either a land lease payment structure or royalties, or through a power purchase agreement or PPA. And I guess the main point I'd like to make with this slide is that this differs from distributed generation, right? So these are going to be the smaller systems that you'll see on your rooftop of a residence or a building. And those systems are what are known as behind the meter. And what they really aim to do is directly offset a local load with any leftover energy being put back onto the grid through a net metering or a net billing arrangement. Next slide, please. All right, so what is needed to develop a utility scale project? Obviously, there are going to be a lot of different factors that come into play with these large scale projects, but there are really 5 pillars, as I like to call them, that come into play. And so despite anything else, these are really the 5 criteria that are absolutely necessary. And if any one of these is missing, the project most likely isn't going to be possible. The first in and of itself is resource. Pretty self-explanatory. This can, whether it's wind, biomass, geothermal, solar, it needs to exist in sufficient quantities in order to be developed. Next is a suitable land base. There needs to be enough of a land base, but then it also needs to be suitable. So what do I mean by this? If a large land base, for example, is used for grazing, a solar project probably isn't going to be a feasible idea there. If utility scale energy development was really the end goal for that plot of land, but a tribe wanted to maintain grazing on that same plot, something like wind, where it's more spread out, would be more suitable. So that's what I mean by that. Another big one is transmission capacity. Simply put, if there's no transmission infrastructure nearby, or if that infrastructure is already at full capacity, then it's either going to need to be upgraded or built in the first place. A power purchaser is also needed. Since many utility scale systems are, well, I guess utility scale systems in general, since they're not offsetting a load directly like distributed generation would be, the energy they generate needs to be sold, because this revenue is really what pays off a utility scale project. And then last but not least is access to capital. These systems are very large and therefore very expensive, and capital is needed to make the initial investment on such a project. I do want to mention, though, on the side that tribes do have some potential advantages when it comes to some of these criteria. Contiguous land base being a big one. Though not available to all tribes, contiguous land base, especially on a large scale, is very attractive to developers, and potentially allowing the tribes to circumvent, or I guess the developers and the tribes to work together to circumvent complicated leases through multiple parties, multiple landowners. So that is one potential benefit. Tribes also have financing options available that others don't, such as government-backed loan guarantees. And in some cases, tribes do have an advantage of being able to sell power to federal facilities, such as national laboratories. Next slide, please. All right, so beyond those 5 pillars, here are just a couple other things that, are pretty common when it comes to challenges or hurdles in development of these large-scale projects. Environmental and archaeological concerns is a big one. Regardless of the land base or the resource potential, tribes may not want to develop in an area that has environmental or archaeological concerns, and with good reason. Let's see. Being able to negotiate a power purchase agreement that's acceptable, right? So if a project, let's just say hypothetically, if a power purchaser for a project is offering 2 cents per kilowatt hour generated, if that's not going to be enough to pay off the system over its lifetime, then that's not what we would consider an acceptable power purchase agreement. It would need to be a higher amount to make the project economically viable. So that's another very common hurdle to see in these projects. And then, unsuitable regulations that can come in the form of outdated or non-existent renewable portfolio standards. And beyond that, community opposition. You'll see this. Yeah, you'll definitely see it with large-scale solar projects, but you're going to see it a lot more than that with projects that have a large footprint, especially projects with like waste to energy or wind. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a look at the U.S. energy industry in 2021. One thing that I'd like you to note right off the bat is that only about a third of the energy produced in the US provides actual useful energy. About 2/3 of this energy is really just lost as waste heat. Um, and for the electricity generation sector, which accounts for a little over a third of the total energy usage, 26% of that came from coal. 31.7 from natural gas, and despite their rapid growth in recent years, solar and wind really only accounted for just under 12% of the electricity generation, and only about 5% of the total energy mix in the U.S. in 2021. Hydropower made up another 2.3%. But it's worth noting that this isn't really likely to grow in any significant fashion in the near future, really due to the lack of sites for developing large hydroelectric dams. Next slide, please. All right, and just a quick snapshot of this year, just really showing where the largest growth is. So as far as utility scale specific additions to the U.S. power grid in 2022, we're expecting just over 46 gigawatts. And what's really worth mentioning is that by far the largest portion of this is solar at 46%. So over 21 gigawatts of solar is expected or planned to come online in the U.S. During the course of this year. Another 7.6 gigawatts for wind. And then another really quickly growing sector is battery storage. And this again, I guess could be a presentation for another time. We can go off in that direction about how batteries are really being used to support the grid in terms of renewable energy. But yeah, that's exactly where we're at right now. Definitely some strong growth going on in the solar and wind sectors. Next slide, please. So what do these projections really show over the next 3 decades, the next 30 years? They show consistent growth, as could be implied from the last slide. They show consistent growth in the renewable energy sector, particularly with regard to solar PV. Other commodities, though, they are still expected to come online over the next 3 decades, albeit at a slower rate, wind being second highest, and hydropower actually being the lowest in terms of growth over the next 30 years. Next slide, please. So why is all of this important? Due to the climate crisis and stringent regulations on fossil fuel emissions, many of the coal-fired and natural gas power plants have either closed or been slated for shutdown in the near future. In fact, the Midwest region itself has 32 power plants, majority of which are coal-fired and natural gas that fall into this category. They fall second behind just the eastern region, second highest amount of planned and pending and already completed shutdowns out of all the BIA regions. They're second place. And in addition to that, what's also important on the other hand is that forecasts are really showing right now that despite these power plant shutdowns, planned or otherwise, electricity demand is expected to continue increasing for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. This really presents an opportunity for tribes in the Midwest region, though, in terms of renewable energy development. So with more than 27 gigawatts of regional coal-fired capacity retiring over the next decade in this region, it's expected that transmission capacity will become more widely available, and at the same time, less electricity is going to be available to consumers. And So in order to expand their reserve margins, utilities are going to need to be putting more electricity onto the grid, really, to accommodate for the demand, right? The increased demand. So for this reason, MISO is expecting that the Midwest region is going to be the largest growth market in the US, specifically for wind development. I know earlier on, I mentioned that through the US as a whole, solar development is expected to be the fastest grower, but specifically in the Midwest region, wind is actually expected to be the largest. So specific to this region, we expect to see 73 gigawatts of onshore wind and then 13 gigawatts of utility scale solar come online. Next slide, please. So with the anticipated power plant shutdowns and increased market growth in the renewable energy sector, how exactly can Midwest tribes take part in this? There are actually several different approaches that tribes can take in the development of these systems. They can own the system outright, which ultimately leads to the tribe generating the most internal revenue, potentially. But this also comes with the most risk. Tribes can form partnerships or work with equity investors who in turn invest money into a project for a share of ownership. Another common approach is the partnership flip model, in which a tax equity partner owns the majority of the project, usually starting out at 99% for the first several years. 7 years is pretty standard of the project. And in order to take advantage of the tax credits, these are the investment tax credit, ITC, or the production tax credit, PTC. And once the tax benefits have ultimately been realized, the majority of the ownership for the project is granted to the tribe. And then lastly, there is third-party ownership of the system. This is going to come with the least risk to the tribe. This is where the tribe receives revenue in the form of land lease payments, royalties, or a share in overall revenue from the project. These are, for the most part, the standards in ownership models for these large utility scale projects. Next slide, please. All right, so how do we pay for these projects, right? Like I said before, they're very expensive. Now, there are a number of grants out there. There's the USDA Rural Development Grant. There's DOE's Tribal Energy Development and Deployment Program. There's commercial bank loans, loan guarantees. The Division of Capital Investment offers the Indian Loan Guarantee and Insurance Program, or ILGP, which offered over $125 million in loan guarantees during 2020 alone. Leveraging tax credits, where an investor creates an investment fund to pool tax credit equity with other financing sources. Then there's the New Market Tax Credit, or NMTC, which really attracts private capital by permitting individual and corporate investors to receive a tax credit against their own federal income tax in exchange for making equity investments in specialized financial markets, and specifically these types of projects. Next slide, please. So all of that being said, why might tribes want to take part in this drive towards utility scale renewable energy development in the first place? There are really a lot of different benefits, first and foremost being bettering the environment, dealing with, curbing greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. Then, for the tribe specifically, opportunities in teaching and training within the energy development sector itself. This can lead to construction and O&M jobs for tribal members. And then there's also the obvious opportunity of generating revenue, which can then be reinvested for future tribal endeavors, really spurring the tribal economic development. Next slide, please. So many tribes have already done this. A lot of tribes have already pursued the utility scale renewable energy generation. And right here are just a few examples. So, we've got the Campo Band of Mission Indians with the Kumeyaay Wind Farm. you can see that this takes a different approach than some of the other projects, right? So this is a land lease and partnership between two third parties, where the tribe is really receiving those royalty payments or land lease payments. And then you have other projects that are directly owned by the tribe, such as the Pueblo of Picaris. So this is actually a good example. I mentioned earlier on that for the most part, these projects on the utility scale are going to be multi-megawatt projects, right? So you see 50 megawatts for Campo Band's wind farm, and then 208 megawatts for the Kerr Dam. But you look at Pueblo of Picaris and it's only 1 megawatt. And the reason that it's really still on this list is because it's structured just like a utility scale project. This is front of the meter. It's a power purchase agreement with the local cooperative. And the tribe is receiving power purchase agreement payments at a rate that is financially justifiable for constructing the project. So it has all of the aspects of a utility scale project, just a smaller scale. And this is something that you might see more of in the coming years. Next slide, please.
Kyle,
Yes.
this is Gwen. Will you be taking questions during the presentation or after?
At the end.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so how can DEMD help? DEMD, for the most part, focuses on the front end of energy and business development. And this is often going to be in the form of assessing energy resources, determining the economic feasibility of developing those resources. And if it turns out to be feasible, DEMD can definitely assist tribes with anything from community planning to identifying partners and developers to reviewing contracts and lease agreements. And our programs at DEMD really do stress the importance of examining the overall viability of a project prior to pursuing it. And by doing this, it really allows tribes to make sound, informed decisions when it comes to their energy development endeavors. Next slide, please. All right, so there are a couple of different avenues through which we can assist tribes here at DEMD, with the early stage work. First and foremost is our grant funding. Our Energy and Mineral Development Program, or EMDP, that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's used to evaluate pre-construction development work for renewable energy. That goes for conventional energy as well, and mineral resources. These typically come in the form of resource assessments, feasibility studies, design work, engineering, again, allowing tribes to make those informed decisions. And the end goal here with these studies is to culminate in a final report that can justify the project to lenders, partners, banks, etc. Next slide, please. Yep. Then there is our TEDC grant that I mentioned earlier as well. And again, the goal behind this grant is to help tribes maximize the benefit of these projects. It can help tribes with developing legal infrastructure and business charters, business formation, enhancing regulations related to energy development and land leases, adopting secure transaction codes, and probably the most common thing that we're seeing with this grant is the establishment, or at least determining the feasibility of establishing a tribal utility authority. Next slide, please. And then aside from our grant programs, DEMD does offer a wide array of services through our technical assistance, which I do want to express is always free to federally recognized tribes. We have many engineers, natural resource specialists, geologists, business specialists on staff. And our job here is to assist in the pre-feasibility work, through resource assessments, project planning, economic analysis. And we can also do, as I mentioned in the last slide, we can also review land lease agreements. We can assist tribes by mapping data, including ownership tracts, infrastructure, and energy lease data. Our marketing team can even assist tribes with marketing collateral, in the form of brochures, flyers, banners, reports, etc. Trade show graphics, and our marketing team, a newer service that they're offering is even web design assistance for tribes. So If there's anything that we don't have the capacity to do in-house, we're always flexible to work with tribes and put them in contact with somebody who can help. Next slide, please. All right, so yeah, this is wrapping everything up. This is just the first of 6 presentations from the Office of Trust Services over the course of PIA. And so please join us later this month and next month as we cover the different topics above: electric vehicles, TUA formation, mineral development, and we hope to see everybody there. Next slide, please. And this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out to us, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We have a question in chat from Jason Oberly. He is asking, what are those growth numbers again?
Absolutely. So in terms of growth, are you talking about for Midwest region specifically in terms of wind and solar?
Yes, I believe that's what he was looking
at. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got an expected 73 gigawatts of onshore wind and 13 gigawatts of utility scale solar that are expected to be developed over the next 10 years. And I did see another comment pop up about emailing the slideshow, and I can definitely get that emailed out too.
We have another question on how do we access the assistance you listed on the previous slide?
Absolutely, great question. So on the final slide, if you visit bia.gov/DEMD, our website will take you to the different links. That includes our EMDP and TEDC grant programs. It also has links to the 6 different branches that I mentioned and technical assistance as well, where tribes can request technical assistance through that route. Also, always feel free to email me at kyle.levin@bia.gov, and I will be happy to either assist or put you in contact with somebody else in our office who's more geared towards whatever assistance is being requested. Definitely. All right.
We have right.
Oh, is it on
Oh, we got another question. Did you see that one in the chat?
Yes. Kyle? Great Lakes wave energy technology. I am not familiar with any updates on that technology. I know it's been pretty slow going as a whole. Wave technology is still one of those sectors that's still in the early stages of development. I do expect it to come on the radar down the road. I'm just not sure exactly how far it's come along to this point, but it's something I could definitely look into.
I'll throw this out there for people attending the session and listening. We'd love to hear more about what you guys are up to. If you have any projects on the radar that you're working on, all that jazz. Love to hear more. You can either share now or reach out to us later. Whatever feels good.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Are you seeing these questions, Kyle?
No, let me
Okay.
open that window real.
I don't mind reading them. Have any of the projects you know of that have been funded shown symptoms of technical issues or potential failure?
So if I'm interpreting this question correctly, is this in terms of showing things during the course of a study or assistance that we're providing, showing things like fatal flaws or just the lack of feasibility? And that's really how I'm interpreting the question. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But if that is the case, that's exactly what our grant programs and our in-house technical assistance is designed to do, right? We want to identify any fatal flaws before a tribe pursues a project. You might have a great solar resource, for example, and it would seem logical to develop that solar resource. But as I covered in some of the other slides, that's not always going to be the case, right? You still need to be able to secure a sufficient power purchase agreement to make the project economic. Again, suitable land base, interconnection into the grid itself, whether or not upgrades are going to be needed, that kind of stuff. That's exactly what our program tries to identify. So in the event of, like, let's say our EMDP grant, if a tribe wants to study a wind project, by the end of that study, and these studies usually take about a year to complete. I've seen them take longer. I've seen them happen a lot quicker, but it's usually a standard 1-year grant. And by the end of that study, a final report will ultimately detail everything that needs to be known, right? Is the project viable? If so, what are the, how in depth into the engineering has that study gone? A lot of different things like that. But the main goal is to, determine the overall feasibility of these projects. I hope that answers your question.
I think it's possible they were curious. I think that was a good answer, Kyle, too. And I think to kind of expand, just like once it's operating and some issues that we've seen. And I think I'll just chime in and say we have seen some like more distributed generation type wind projects experience some issues where the wind turbine just stops working, and there's a lot of factors that go into those situations where, again, I think what Kyle said is making sure you have a good plan up front, including operation and maintenance plans and funding to kind of pay for that too. That's the operational funding to help keep up with that is key for preventative maintenance. So I think, Kyle, another question, can you do presentation like this to tribes if requested similar?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Any tribe, that's exactly what we're here for. I'd be more than happy to present on this or any other renewable energy related matter for that instance.
Great questions. Thank you all. Well, I'm sorry. I'm back. Kyle's doing a great job, and just in case people are wondering who's helping him with questions, I'm Jennifer Ryman, the branch chief for the Renewable and Distributed Generation branch at DEMD. Great. Well, we're always available. You guys can always give us a call, email, at any time, we're happy to talk about anything that's on your radar. Gwen, it looks like that might be it for questions. So I don't know if you want to wrap this up or if there's anything else on.
Okay, if there are no other questions, or if you want to unmute your mic, ask the question. Otherwise, we'll end the session in a few minutes. Thank you for the information. That was very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, if there's no other questions, we'll complete the session, and thank you everybody for attending the session, and we hope we gave you information that would help you. And like Kyle said, he is available by email. The PowerPoint will be uploaded to the chat for anybody to download, and that's all we have. So have a good day, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Oh, wait. Oh, I seen somebody had their hand up and they quickly put it down. But thank you, everybody. Have a good day.